Chapter 721, Qingming City, was one of the Xiang Immortal dynasty's most strategic strongholds. Its walls were defended by 5 perfect golden immortals, each hand-picked by the dynasty's greatest powers and equipped with trump card techniques far beyond those of ordinary golden immortals. Beneath them lay a vast, multi-layered formation that made any true immortal assault nearly impossible. Yet on this morning, a single figure charged straight at the city gates, his aura crackling with raw, unrelenting force. Even the veteran cultivators atop the walls stiffened in alarm. They had never seen pressure like this directed at Qingming City before. Ye Cheng moved like a storm incarnate. With every step, the earth trembled. The air around him warped under his overwhelming presence. The 5 golden immortals exchanged uneasy glances. No one had ever dared to breach their defenses alone. Inside the command hall, the city's lord ground his teeth. Ever since his son's death and the disappearance of the beast responsible, he'd burned with silent fury. To be confronted now by a lone attacker was an affront he could not tolerate. "They think we're that easy to intimidate?" he snarled, his face ashen. "Open the city gates, let him come in, and let Qingming City teach him true humiliation." "No need to form the seal," the lord of Qingming City boomed, cutting off his underlings' movements with a wave of his hand. "I'll capture this beast alive and carve him into pieces myself." He vaulted onto an immortal rainbow and shot out of the city lord's mansion. The 4 golden immortals at his side wasted no time. They followed in his wake, arcs of prismatic light trailing behind them. All across Qingming City, cultivators of the Xiang Immortal dynasty readied themselves at their posts. Soon, a tangle of brilliant rainbows filled the sky. 100 or more masters, stepping lightly on clouds, faced the newcomers. One by one, their battle auras flared, coalescing into a rolling storm cloud that eclipsed the entire city. Those who had earlier felt overwhelmed by Ye Cheng's fierce presence now instinctively hushed their whispers. Eyes turned upward, fixated on the city lord and his retinue, brimming with awe and fear. "This is the very heart of the immortal dynasty," someone muttered. "A single city, and already there are hundreds of cultivators above the heavenly immortal realm." Outside the walls of Qingming City, the 5 golden immortals leading the defense stood ready. Even without activating the city's massive defensive array, their combined power was more than enough to slay any opponent who dared challenge His Majesty's rule. Nearby, an elder immortal whispered in terror. "Their strength alone, it's enough to kill any golden immortal who offends them." High above the city, Ye Cheng hovered on his cloud, watching the defenders scramble. A thin smile played on his lips. He wasn't the least bit concerned by their precautions. With his current cultivation, even if they triggered the full might of their formation, it wouldn't change the outcome. If anything, the faster they acted, the sooner this battle would be over. "Since you're so eager to save me the trouble," he called down in a measured voice, "I'll grant you a swift death." His words cut through the tense air, and the faces of Qingming City's defenders went pale. They stared up at him, eyes blazing with murderous intent. "He's insane, utterly mad," one of the golden immortals hissed. "Who is this killer? How dare he speak to the lords of Qingming City like that?" Another demanded, fury and disbelief warring in his voice. "He's completely out of his mind, utterly unreasonable." A ripple of murmurs spread among the assembled immortals in Qingming City as their gazes flicked toward Ye Cheng. Many of them quietly fell back, putting distance between themselves, Ye Cheng and the city lord. No one wanted to be caught up in whatever was about to unfold. Yet Ye Cheng stood motionless, his expression unreadable, as if the entire scene barely registered. His cool indifference only heightened the other's anxiety. Could he really possess the power to act with such brazen arrogance? None wished to be the unwitting victim of his next move. Just then, a fresh beam of immortal light exploded from the city lord's mansion, streaking straight toward Lord Qingming's back. It was the city lord's celestial informant, his chief intelligence gatherer, rushing forward with terror etched across his face. Eyes wide, voice trembling, he bent close and whispered urgently to Lord Qingming. City Lord Qingming's gaze hardened into pure, murderous intent as he fixed his eyes on Ye Cheng. "So you're the one who killed my son. Congratulations, your handiwork is truly impressive." Ye Cheng remained unruffled. During the Meteorite Wasteland battle, countless immortal masters had seen his face. Given his ties to the Xiang immortal dynasty, anyone with the slightest determination could trace him. Sure enough, one onlooker, having cross-referenced the reports, pointed him out. "You little thief, die!" With a roar, Qingming unleashed his full power. He drew an obsidian sword, and with a single sweeping stroke, the blade's radiance exploded outward, coalescing into a roaring crimson galaxy. It barreled toward Ye Cheng, the void within it alive with nightmarish visions, immortals torn apart in rivers of blood, demons collapsing in mangled agony. Onlookers shuddered at the horrific display. This cosmic maelstrom was one of Qingming's ultimate trump cards, preserved only in a fragment of an ancient Taoist treatise that lists 3 such forbidden techniques. The Lord of Qingming City had only ever learned the simplest technique, and yet this single skill made him a battlefield juggernaut. Now his sword drawn in fury, the murderous intent rippling from his blade, turned the 4 golden immortals who had come to assist him pale with shock. Each of these immortals carried a secret trump card of their own, and until now, they had all dismissed the Lord of Qingming City as no serious threat. But in this moment of raw power, they discovered to their dismay that their finest techniques were utterly outmatched by a true scion of a great clan. Helpless and humiliated, they could only stare across the field at Ye Cheng, whose distance didn't lessen the undisguised contempt shining in their eyes. 4 golden immortals hovered above the battlefield, sneering in unison. He's finally met his match. He barely wounded a handful of junior disciples from the immortal court, and now he dares challenge us all? They're right, he's nothing more than an ant, doomed to regret his arrogance too late. Their contempt rippled outward, confident and scornful, until the next instant, when terror replaced every mocking grin. Without warning, Ye Cheng stepped forward. A single, imperceptible motion of his palm swept toward the swirling sword chi that all 4 immortals had unleashed. The eddying lights, so brilliant they resembled a miniature galaxy, fractured and collapsed at his touch. Before anyone could gasp, Ye Cheng vanished and reappeared at the head of the Lord of Qingming City. With calm precision, he raised his hand and pressed down. The Lord's eyes, still burning with murderous intent moments before, flew wide in panic. Then, in a flash of crimson mist, his body shattered into nothingness. In that instant, a golden immortal perfection realm master was erased by a single palm strike. He never even realized how he fell. How could this be? A stunned hush fell over Qingming City. The 4 great golden immortals, the assembled celestial deities, and every immortal master in the streets all stared in disbelief at the empty air, where, just moments ago, the Lord of Qingming City had stood, and at the suddenly deserted platform. Surely their eyes were deceiving them. Chapter 722. Inside and outside the walls of Qingming City, a deathly silence took hold, only to be shattered in an instant. The immortal masters of the Xiang immortal dynasty stood frozen in shock, but Ye Cheng pressed on with his relentless assault. His Yuan origin celestial body blazed with blinding divine radiance, and his blood and qi roared like a boundless sea. No immortal techniques, no Taoist incantations, no mystical artifacts, only raw, overwhelming physical strength guided his every move. With each thunderous blow, cultivators were torn apart, their agonized cries dissolving into crimson mist. In the time it took for a single incense stick to burn, hundreds of immortal masters lay wounded or collapsed, many reduced to ash. "Immortal dynasty masters, is this the best you can do?" Ye Cheng remarked coolly, advancing with unhurried, deliberate strides. No one in Qingming City dared to intercept him. Even the handful of surviving elites from the Xiang immortal dynasty remained rooted to the spot, too terrified to challenge the peerless killing power he had just unleashed. The guards didn't even dare send word to the other immortal dynasty outposts for reinforcements. They stood frozen, watching as Ye Cheng strode into the city lord's mansion and carried off every divine artifact and treasure that Qingming City had amassed over the past 1,000,000 years. Only after he was gone did they exhale in relief. Then, with trembling hands, they activated their spirit talismans and relayed the disaster to the other bases. They all knew what this meant for their own futures. Qingming City lay in ruins. The 5 golden immortals lay dead. By right, they should have perished with the city, but instead they had survived, humiliated, and allowed Ye Cheng to make off with the entire treasury. Such a catastrophic failure would bring them the harshest possible punishment. Yet, at this moment, punishment was the least of their concerns. All that mattered was that they were still alive. By the time the shocking news reached the Xiang Immortal dynasty's highest leadership, its elders were seething with fury. Ye Cheng and the other masters of the Xiang Immortal dynasty had been ordered to remain in Qingming City and await the arrival of the Golden Immortals dispatched from the other strongholds. They weren't surprised by the summons. They'd steeled themselves for whatever punishment the Immortal dynasty might impose. 3 days later, when the Golden Immortals finally arrived, Ye Cheng and his peers braced for the worst. To their astonishment, their sentence was nothing more than a token reduction in their stipends, a far cry from the draconian penalties they had imagined. "What's going on?" one master breathed, unable to hide his disbelief. "Can they really be letting us off that easily?" another whispered. "Or are they planning to punish our families instead?" An uneasy murmuring swept through the group as they made their way to the city lord's mansion, determined to demand answers from the senior Golden Immortal in charge. In the vast audience hall, the senior Golden Immortal regarded them in silence for a long moment. Then, in a measured tone, he announced, "This is all the punishment you will receive. The fall of Qingming City was not your fault." A wave of relief rippled through the gathered masters, only to be tempered by the Golden Immortal's next words, spoken so quietly that many had to lean in to hear. "It's not your fault. The enemy was simply too strong." Ye Cheng allowed himself a faint smile of relief. Ever since he set out for Qingming City to assume his new post, 4 separate dispatches had arrived, each from one of the great immortal dynasties he'd already struck in the meteorite wasteland: Ziwei, Zidian, Moyu, and Queshan. All 4 reported the same astonishing news. Ye Cheng had not only stormed their key strongholds, but broken them from within. And of course, there was Qingming City itself, the prized fortress of the Xiang Immortal dynasty, which he'd captured just days earlier. One city might be shrugged off as a lapse in vigilance, but 5? No dynasty could claim sheer incompetence when every premier town in their territories had fallen to a single man. In the war-torn expanse known as the 10,000 Dynasties battlefield, Ye Cheng's feat spoke for itself. "He may stand alone," the Golden Immortal observed, voice low and tinged with awe, "but his reputation carries the weight of an army, and that alone will give any immortal dynasty pause." Had it not been for the rock-solid first-hand reports, no one would have believed such a person could exist. How could a cultivator no higher than the heavenly immortal realm single-handedly shatter 5 great immortal dynasties and overrun 5 fortified towns? Even the Golden Immortal himself found the news impossible to swallow. Yet every master across the western region's battlefront confirmed it. Ye Cheng had breached those defenses one after another. His exploits made him the talk of every encampment and sect. Everywhere the immortal cultivators went, they carried sketches of his face, each portrait capturing the same calm yet unshakable resolve. His name burned itself into their memories as the greatest and most inexplicable phenomenon the war zone had ever seen. Now, having left the chaos of battle behind, Ye Cheng sat alone in a hidden valley, preparing for a period of secluded cultivation. Before him lay the precious spoils he had claimed from the 5 dynasties and towns. As he quietly inspected his haul, a satisfied smile spread across his face. Despite all the disbelief and wonder he'd stirred among his peers, Ye Cheng knew exactly who he was and exactly what he was capable of achieving. "Although I still lack the Chaos God stones needed to break into the domination realm, the divine materials I've gathered, plus the 300 kilograms of Chaos God liquid I recovered from Qingming City, are more than enough to elevate my 4-fold Yuanxi killing sword to the very pinnacle of the Golden Immortal rank." Ye Cheng held out his hand. Layer upon layer of refined immortal iron and a crystalline orb of Chaos God liquid hovered before him, each pulse radiating potent spiritual energy. At his side, the 4-fold Yuanxi killing sword trembled as if it had just laid eyes on its most treasured plaything. Its weapon spirit leaped with unguarded joy and eager anticipation, an emotion Gu felt as keenly as his own heartbeat. A satisfied smile curved Ye Cheng's lips. Without hesitation, he invoked the power of the Yuanxi Tiangong. Brilliant energy coalesced around the sword and the divine materials, and the sacred ritual to forge the blade's ultimate transformation began. A surge of majestic spiritual power flared up inside Ye Cheng, coalescing into roaring spiritual flames. He swept up the immortal-grade ore, the bars of divine iron, and the vial of chaotic divine liquid from the altar, and cast them all into the heart of the blaze. The metals and the strange fluid liquefied on contact, merging into a shimmering pool of celestial water. A low, resonant hum vibrated through the ravine. Threads of fairy light danced across the surface of the pool, and swirls of auspicious clouds spiraled upward as if drawn by an invisible hand. The once bleak canyon transformed in an instant into a verdant grotto shot through with prismatic hues, so dazzling that any passerby would risk losing themselves in its boundless beauty. Ye Cheng stood at the water's edge, eyes alight with wonder. No wonder this chaotic divine liquid is famed for purifying true immortal weapons, he murmured. Under its influence, even these divine iron ingots, once only halfway to the golden immortal standard, are being perfected, their countless flaws in the Chaos Tao smoothed away. As the divine water roiled and reformed around the metals, Ye Cheng felt the raw vitality of heaven and earth converging here. In this moment, the canyon was no mere valley. It was a transcendent forge, forging legends in liquid light. But the moment the chaos divine liquid fused into the pool, Ye Cheng realized he'd stumbled onto something extraordinary. The divine water's spiritual essence wasn't just on par with top-tier golden immortal materials. It had surpassed them. Any residual impurity had been purged in the fusion process. Such refined essence was more than sufficient to temper mid to high-level true immortal weapons, and even primary arms of the true immortal stage could be forged from it. Stunned by the discovery, Ye Cheng's heart raced. Without a moment's hesitation, he summoned the fourfold primordial killing sword and plunged it into the shimmering pool of divine water. Activating his Yuanxi Tiangong technique, he began the sacrificial refinement. The canyon trembled as thunderclouds gathered overhead, jagged bolts of lightning fracturing the sky. Ethereal killing visions swirled around the sword like a murderous storm. Minutes stretched on as wind and thunder raged. Then, one by one, the visions dissolved, the crackling thunderlight dimmed. At last, the entire pool of divine water, along with its boundless divine energy, was absorbed into the fourfold primordial killing sword. A final, resonant buzz of thunder rolled through the valley, and the sword emerged reborn, sharper, keener, and brimming with newfound power. Lightning crackled across the sky as a titanic thunder tribulation descended upon the canyon. Boom! The thunder's roar rattled mountains and valleys for miles around. Immortal masters who had been roaming the area froze at the sound, then instinctively turned toward the canyon, their eyes bright with anticipation. That sound, could it be a world-shaking treasure emerging? I've never seen such a grand spectacle from mere real immortal soldiers. We must not let this chance slip by. Without another thought, dozens of cultivators poured their divine senses into their bodies and swept toward the canyon at top speed. By the time they arrived, the thunder clouds had dissipated. In the center of the canyon stood Ye Cheng, calm and composed, his cultivation aura unwavering. Hovering around him were 4 sleek blades of pure light, the fourfold Yuanxi killing swords, each one inscribed with the intricate pattern of the Yuanxi killing formation. Energy radiated from the blades in powerful pulses, pressing against the assembled masters and forcing some to step back, wide-eyed with astonishment. These aren't ordinary heavenly swords, one veteran realmbreaker muttered. At their current tier, a single sword would already outclass most real immortal soldiers. 4 of them, all bearing the Yuanxi killing formation's runes. The power must be astronomical. Another snarled, and the materials required to refine these blades are far rarer than those for any same-level immortal troops. Ye Cheng has either flown too close to the sun, or he's about to snatch a prize none of us could even hope to touch. Ye Cheng offered them a polite nod, but made no move to sheath his swords. His expression was cool, as if he knew all along he would triumph over the thunder tribulation and over every onlooker's expectations. Below the precipice, the canyon floor rumbled once more, hinting at the true treasure, that had just revealed itself. But all eyes remained fixed on the man and his 4 dancing blades, each pulse of energy a bold announcement. No one would leave this place empty-handed. Ye Cheng had only expected to refine the Yuanxi killing swords up to the peak of the golden immortal rank, even after gathering Chaos Divine Liquid and the rare Iron of Immortality from the 5 great immortal dynasties. In the end, however, he had gravely underestimated the liquid's power. With a brilliant flash of light and a surge of divine energy, all 4 swords leapt beyond his expectations, each one ascending into the primary stage of the true immortal rank. That's it! The treasure is truly born. Ye Cheng whispered in awe as the world around him trembled with the sword's newfound might. Far above, perched on the canyon's rim, dozens of rival cultivators detected the sudden spy, Xianxia. Their eyes went cold, lips curling into predatory smiles. "Someone beat us to it? We can't allow that," one growled. "Act now, seize those 4 immortal blades," another urged, already signaling his strongest disciples to descend into the gorge. As they readied to descend, Ye Cheng's heart pounded, but he had no intention of surrendering his hard-earned prize. With the 4 dazzling blades in hand, he braced himself for the coming tide of enemies. Just as they were about to strike, a sharp-eyed immortal halted mid-step. "Isn't that Ye Cheng?" he gasped. Ye Cheng, the one who toppled 5 great cities, dared to feud with the 5 immortal dynasties, and yet still wanders free. Ye Cheng, who had been ready to draw his 4-fold killing sword and unleash the newly awakened Yuanxi killing sword, froze. Outside the canyon, countless immortals hovered, eager either to fish in troubled waters or test their strength against a peer. But the moment they recognized him, every last one recoiled, as if a cat had appeared among mice. Greed in their eyes instantly turned to awe. Without waiting for any invitation, they retreated in stampede, vanishing from the canyon like mist. Left alone, Ye Cheng surveyed the empty heights in genuine bewilderment. He ran a hand through his hair and whispered, "My reputation is already that loud?" Chapter 723. Ye Cheng stood amid the wreckage, watching the immortal lords scatter for their lives. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. With a wry shake of his head, he sheathed the primordial killing sword and murmured, "No matter. There'll be plenty more chances to put you through your paces." Despite his sudden fame, Ye Cheng had also earned the wrath of the 5 great immortal dynasties. Each dynasty was overseen by multiple true immortal ancestors, some even perfected to the true immortal stage, rivals in power to any immortal lord. In Feixiandao Prefecture, such strength was far from common. So far, he'd razed 5 cities and slain dozens of gold-ranked immortals, but those victories were only scratches on the dynasty's armor. As soon as their supreme leaders recovered from this shock, they would unleash a brutal counterstrike. When that day came, he'd welcome the battle and a chance to test his sword once more. Sure enough, on the vast plain of 10,000 nations, urgent missives flashed between the 5 dynasties. The war drums were already beating. News of Ye Cheng's daring feats spread like wildfire beyond the battlefield, reaching the sacred halls of the 5 great immortal dynasties. There, the true immortal ancestors, the highest elders of each dynasty, gathered in alarm as they reviewed his record. "He razed our cities and wounded our golden immortals," one senior ancestor thundered. "Such a madman has not emerged in generations. We must show no mercy, capture him alive, and tear him limb from limb." "Better still," another added, "whoever delivers him safely into our hands shall earn the rare privilege of becoming my disciple and training within our ancestral realm." In the Queshan Immortal Dynasty, these orders materialized as a blood-red edict that descended through swirling celestial mists to the very heart of their ancestral sanctuary. Boundless pressure emanated from the scroll, so overwhelming that the golden immortals who bore the news collapsed to their knees. With voices trembling, they dared only whisper, This is the decree of a true immortal. It exudes the monstrous killing intent of our dynasty's oldest ancestor. With all our strength, we will elevate the golden immortal masters of our dynasty so that, in no time, their combat prowess rivals that of true immortals. In obedience to the ancestor's decree, we pledge to meet his expectations. We will capture the lunatic who dared defy our immortal dynasty and deliver him back for justice. At these words, Every golden immortal of the Queshan immortal dynasty bowed in unison. They accepted the ancestors' edict and turned back toward the Wanchao battlefield, determination blazing in their eyes. At the same moment, the Moyue, Ziyang, Zidian, and Ziyue immortal dynasties issued identical commands. Alarmed, the true immortal ancestors of all 5 great dynasties either proclaimed their own decrees or unleashed forbidden divine weapons. Their goal was unmistakable: capture Ye Cheng alive and restore the honor of the immortal dynasties. To sweeten the stakes, each true immortal promised lavish rewards, personal mentorship to the victor, and entry into their ancestral realm for advanced cultivation. Thus, with fate and fortune intertwined, the race to seize Ye Cheng began. If these allotments are handled correctly, each golden immortal lineage could one day raise another golden immortal, or even a true immortal. No sooner had the forbidden weapon been bestowed than the 5 great immortal dynasties pressed their advantage. They poured fresh levies into the field, dispatched elite generals, and extended their influence far beyond the 10,000 dynasties' main battleground. A murmur of disbelief ran through the halls of power. Talent alone can't explain Ye Cheng's achievements, one grandmaster sneered. No mere cultivator could advance so far in only a few thousand years. There must be a hidden sect supporting him. Root out that sect and destroy it. And then we'll remind everyone not to dare challenge the majesty of our Imo or Tal dynasties. Soon the uproar spread from the dynasty's own territories into neighboring realms. Councils and courts alike were thrown into turmoil. Queshan, Moyu, have the 5 dynasties lost their minds? Demanded one provincial governor. They're creeping into our realm. What's their aim? Do they intend to start a war? Across every province and stronghold, immortal masters and top-tier powerhouses exchanged grim, worried glances. The balance of power, once so stable, suddenly felt perilously fragile. Soon, shock gave way to glee, and then to outright mockery. Word had spread. The 5 great immortal dynasties, whose combined strength usually dominated the battlefield of 10,000 dynasties, had been upended by a single scion of a declining house. They actually lost to someone from a dying dynasty? One cultivator jeered, shaking his head in disbelief. No wonder they've been so frantic. They've just lost all face. The armies that had raged in anger mere moments before now traded derisive laughs at the expense of the quintet of houses. Even as they taunted their former foes, however, every mouth whispered the same name: Ye Cheng. Interest in this upstart spread like wildfire. Secret envoys and scouts fanned out across the battlefield and far beyond it to learn all they could about him. But their motives split in two. The 5 great immortal dynasties were determined to snuff out Ye Cheng and anyone who stood with him. By contrast, rival powers saw an unprecedented opportunity. Here was a prodigy whose talent alone had unseated centuries of tradition. They were eager to throw their weight behind him, to invest in his future, and ride his wings to glory. In that instant, both on the field of battle and in every hall of power, Ye Cheng's name rang out with equal parts fear, envy, and grudging admiration. Ye Cheng's name rang out across the realm, but before the echoes could fade, a new shockwave of news swept all attention back to the Wanchao battlefield. A fully nurtured Chaos God Mountain had erupted into existence 3 days ago. Linglong Xianxiao's earlier detection had been right. The mysterious mountain had finally come to life. Word of its birth spread like wildfire, drawing the gaze of nearly every true immortal sect in Fanfiction Daozhou. Even those with no direct ties to the old Xianxiao scrambled to stake their claim. Bribery, theft, nothing was off limits as they amassed tokens from the fading Xianxiao and rallied their deadliest Xiandao warriors. Without hesitation, they surged onto the Wanchao plain. What was already a maelstrom of clashing swords and crackling magic became even more chaotic. Still, no faction wavered in its zeal, including Ye Cheng. Unfazed by the bedlam, he pressed forward, determined to seize whatever destiny this newborn Chaos God Mountain might hold. A new Chaos Divine Mountain. How could I possibly pass this up? Ever since his decisive victory over the masters of the 5 great immortal dynasties in the Meteorite Wasteland, Ye Cheng had learned that a fresh Chaos Divine Mountain was on the verge of manifesting. For days now, he'd remained in secluded contemplation, tracking every scrap of news about its emergence. At long last, the moment he'd been waiting for had arrived. How could Ye Cheng, of all people, let such an opportunity slip through his fingers? He knew well that the very land which nurtured a Chaos Divine Mountain was guarded by the dreaded Chaos Divine Ban, a sealing technique that drastically curbs the power of any cultivator who enters. Even those who had ascended to the true immortal realm could not unleash more than heavenly immortal level might within its boundaries, and at best reach the 7th or 8th heaven of the heavenly immortal stage. For golden immortal cultivators, the suppression proved even more severe. Anyone capable of fighting at the 2nd or 3rd heaven of the heavenly immortal was already considered extraordinary under the ban's influence. Yet, despite this severe limitation, not a single true immortal ancestor from the major dynasties or sects had dared to venture into the upcoming fray. Ye Cheng's eyes gleamed. He would, but only because he was ready. With his unprecedented mastery of both sword and secret arts and the strategic advantage he'd gleaned from the meteorite wasteland, he had no intention of watching from the sidelines. When the Chaos Divine Mountain fully materialized, he would be there, first in line, weaving triumph from the very chaos that had shackled every other would-be contender. Even 1,000 golden immortals acting in concert, no matter how elaborate their killing formations, would scarcely scratch a true immortal's defenses. Yet a few dozen heavenly immortals of the 2nd and 3rd heavens, armed with forbidden weapons and willing to cross sacred borders, could easily eliminate a 7th or 8th heavenly immortal. Reaching true immortal status is so perilous that even the most daring of the ancient progenitors hesitate. Their disciples and clans constantly urge them to abandon such foolhardy schemes. Ye Cheng, however, had no such entanglements to hold him back. In the sacred mountain treasure domain, without drawing on spiritual power or heavenly techniques, relying solely on his physical body, his combat strength already rivaled that of a 7th or 8th heavenly immortal. The moment he unleashed his heavenly skills, tapped into his inner magic, or activated his divine realm, he could match even perfected heavenly immortals, pushing the very limits of the Chaos Treasure Domain's magical suppression. Such power made him a force to be reckoned with, one that every ancient clan, every true immortal, would think twice before challenging. He also wielded the ultimate strike of the Xianxia killing formation. The Chaos Treasure Realm's innate divine prohibition is formidable, but it can only suppress true immortals. An immortal venerable's killing force shatters that boundary. In Ye Cheng's hand, the fourfold Xianxia killing sword, now risen to a true immortal-grade immortal weapon, amplified his formation's power to unprecedented heights. His projection of the Xianxia Immortal King had truly reached the mid-stage immortal venerable level. Even deep within the Divine Mountain's treasure land, he could unleash that spectral king to dominate the entire scene. With such a trump card at his disposal, Ye Cheng felt invincible. Without hesitation, he set out for the birthplace of the newly emerged Chaos Divine Mountain. Kongyu Valley lies on the border between the west and east sectors of the Wanchao battlefield. 1,000 miles north of its gates stands the nascent Chaos Divine Mountain, the very source of the realm's chaotic energies. And there Ye Cheng would make his next move. The Divine Mountain has only just come into being, and its surrounding Chaos Treasure Land still swirls with untamed qi. Even a true immortal who ventures too close risks grievous injury. The land must first settle and calm itself. Though the gathered immortal masters grow restless, they can do nothing but hover at the threshold, awaiting the day the mountain's energies fully stabilize. That day is still more than a month away, and no one wants to squander the precious time. In the heart of the so-called empty valley, once a remote, forgotten wasteland, a bustling makeshift trading enclave has sprung up. Here, immortal masters haggled over secret techniques, rare pills, and primal relics. Word of every hidden trove and cultivation method circulated like a current, fueling plans for the fierce struggle that will inevitably erupt over the Divine Mountain's fortunes. Ye Cheng broke through the heavy cloud cover and hovered high above the empty valley. He drew in a long breath and cast his spiritual sense across the scene. From where he stood, the vast arena of Wanchao lay sprawled in every direction, east, west, north, and south, blending into a teeming city of immortal cultivators. Tents and pavilions dotted the rocky ground, Colored light beams shot upward as treasure merchants displayed their wad, res. Immortal mounts stamped and roared, while cultivation experts debated strategy in low, urgent tones. For a moment, Ye Cheng felt his pulse quicken. He had come prepared, his Dao heart focused, his will unshakable, but even so, the scale of this prelude to war was staggering. Clutching his sword's hilt, he floated down toward a cluster of azure tents where information on the Divine Mountain's hidden caverns was said to be traded. Ahead lay trials that would test his spirit, his resolve, and his skill. Yet beside the hum of negotiations and the promise of untold power, Ye Cheng sensed something else: opportunity, and he would seize it. Ye Cheng hovered above the newly formed Chaos Divine Mountain, surveying the scene with cool detachment. It was no surprise that masters from all 4 regions had converged here. How could they resist the lure of a fresh divine mountain? So long as the land's protective wards didn't prove too stringent, this place would draw cultivators from every corner of fairyland. And wherever powerful beings gathered, conflict was never far behind. Some sought to claim the mountain's hidden treasures for themselves, while others planned to eliminate potential rivals before they could grow too strong. As Ye Cheng extended his divine sense, he detected 3 skirmishes erupting in quick succession. Sword ki clashing in midair, torrents of spirit energy unleashed, and cultivators dueling fiercely for tactical advantage. Shaking his head, he retracted his awareness and selected a relatively isolated spot, intending to land there and wait out the initial chaos until the treasure land stabilized around him. He hadn't even touched down when a whisper of air drew his attention. Swish! Before he could react, a thin yet razor-sharp sword, floating silently as if guided by a hidden hand, slashed toward the nape of his neck. Ye Cheng's heart stuttered for a fraction of a second. Then, with lightning speed, he spun on the spot, his own sword flashing into existence. The 2 blades collided in a shower of sparks so blinding it lit up the nearby boulders like a pair of midday suns. Ye Cheng's swordsmanship was world-renowned. He deflected the assailant's thrust with a decisive parry and followed through with a counterstrike that forced his opponent to yield ground. But as the echo of steel on steel faded, Ye Cheng froze. The wind carried a faint, mocking laugh, and only then did he realize this was no random attack. This was a calculated ambush, and somewhere in the swirling mist of the Chaos Divine Mountain, his unknown assailant was already preparing the next move. Chapter 7-4 Crack! A sharp report of metal striking metal echoed through Kongyu Valley, halting every immortal cultivator in their tracks. All eyes turned as a flying sword arced through the air, fell behind Ye Cheng, and shattered into 2 pieces upon impact. Excitement rippled across the crowd. Emblazoned on the sword's hilt was a coiled silver serpent, its twin fangs gleaming with an icy light, and bizarre, intricate runes etched along its length. Even a grand golden immortal would feel a tremor in his spirit merely by beholding such a weapon. No wonder the assembled masters were so agog. By the heavens, that's the Silver Serpent sword, the signature flying sword of the Silver Serpent Golden Immortal. But how could it break? The Silver Serpent Golden Immortal was one of Kongyu Valley's most famous figures. He'd come from the northern warfront, and while not born to one of the great immortal dynasties, he descended from a lineage that, though in decline, still boasted formidable prowess. Yet here lay his treasured weapon, shattered beyond repair. Shock and disbelief flashed across every face in the valley. Ye Cheng's reputation had spread like wildfire through the immortal realms. His ruthless methods and uncanny assassination swordsmanship struck such fear into powerful sects that few dared challenge him. In just the past few days, a string of immortal masters, many of them newcomers to Kongyu Valley, had been cut down before they even understood what was happening. Their collected treasures became the spoil of the Silver Snake Golden Immortal, enriching him for the looming contest over Chaos God Mountain's hidden troves. So when his prized weapon, the fabled Heavenly Silver Snake Sword, unexpectedly fractured in midair, the assembled immortals were thunderstruck. The attack had come with breathtaking suddenness. By the time anyone grasped what was unfolding, the blade had snapped into 2 jagged halves. Every pair of eyes swung upward to find Ye Cheng hovering effortlessly, a faint glimmer of triumph on his face. Until that moment, no one had taken Gu seriously. He was just one more celestial visitor in a valley where newcomers arrived and perished in equal measure. Now, as shards of the once unbreakable sword drifted to the ground, the crowd fell deathly silent, each spectator wrestling with a single impossible question. How had this seemingly ordinary immortal accomplished the extraordinary? No one in Kongyu Valley had taken him seriously. After all, a man without even the rudiments of golden immortal cultivation was no more than an ant to the immortal masters who gathered here. Yet just moments ago, this unassuming ant had survived a direct strike from the Silver Snake Golden Immortal's flying sword. The assembled immortals stared in disbelief. Before they could fully absorb the shock, a sharp whoosh cut through the void again. A second silver serpent sword materialized, hissing as it lunged for Ye Cheng's left flank. But at that same instant, a figure blurred into view on his right, the Silver Snake Golden Immortal himself, his eyes as cold and unforgiving as steel. In his hand gleamed the third and final silver serpent sword, its edge dripping with lethal intent. "You actually managed to parry my blade," the Golden Immortal declared, in a voice stripped of all warmth. "Your strength is remarkable, but remarkable or not, you cannot escape death's verdict." With that, he launched his last sword in a deathly arc. The moment he finished speaking, two silver serpent-forged swords flickered into view at his side. In an instant, they unleashed twin beams of light, like venomous snakes streaking through the air, each trail of energy radiating an icy chill. The assembled immortal masters gasped. Those sword beams carried no detectable divine power signature. Had they not been watching the duel up close, they wouldn't have sensed a thing until the blades struck. Of course, by that point, it would have been far too late. Ye Cheng, still momentarily stunned, suddenly felt the twin beams sweeping toward his temples. One veered left, the other to the right. Then, with a soft puff, his body met the onslaught head-on. Each attack, deadly enough to fell a 7th-rank Golden Immortal, shattered against his chest, dissolving into motes of spiritual light that drifted away on the breeze. A stunned silence fell over the crowd. The normally unshakable Silver Serpent Golden Immortal's confident mask cracked as he stared in disbelief. "What?" he breathed, his face paling. Ye Cheng watched in growing disbelief. When the Silver Snake Golden Immortal's opening strike missed, the Immortal had waved it off as simple underestimation. Surely he just held back. Yet now, having unleashed his absolute best and watched it land squarely on Ye Cheng without so much as a bruise, his arrogance began to crack. With a furious snarl, the Silver Snake Golden Immortal hefted his eponymous blade. "Enough," he hissed, invoking a potent spatial spell. A rippling, silvery vortex unfurled around him, pulling him into its heart as he tried to vanish from sight. But the next instant, a titanic force snatched him from the rift. Like a rag doll, he was hurled through the air and slammed into the valley floor. Boom! A mountain of dust and debris exploded skyward. Shocked cultivators scattered, stumbling back as they released their spiritual senses into the roiling cloud. When the haze finally cleared, every eye went wide. At the heart of the empty valley yawned a vast crater, its jagged edges carved deep into the earth, testimony to the Silver Snake Golden Immortal's abrupt, violent end to his escape. The Silver Snake Golden Immortal slumped against the tunnel wall, blood foaming at his lips and his eyes frozen wide in disbelief. His sternum had collapsed from end to end. He tried to speak, but only managed a feeble cough of crimson froth before his breath and strength faded away. At that moment, a stunned whisper rippled through the empty valley. "Silver Snake, Golden Immortal, just like that?" For over 10 days, the Silver Snake had dominated this forsaken ravine. From the first morning he appeared, dozens of would-be assassins, eager to prevent his rumored slaughter on Chaos Divine Mountain, had ventured down to challenge him, only to fall beneath his cold, unforgiving blade. His reputation skyrocketed, though he never cracked the very top ranks. Among the nearly 10,000 cultivators who now lurked in the empty valley, he was universally reckoned one of the 10 strongest. And yet, there he lay, slain by a single, casually hurled blade from Ye Cheng. It was a death no one had foreseen, and the valley's masters trembled at the ease of it. Ye Cheng stood motionless on the rocky ledge, pale dawn light glinting on his blade. Before him lay the body of the Silver Snake Golden Immortal, eyes still wide in shock, No one could believe such a fearsome warrior had fallen from a single, seemingly casual swing. Were they all hallucinating? Swoosh! 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 A wind chime chorus of footfalls sounded as several cultivators burst into the empty valley, their cloaks snapping behind them. They halted abruptly at the sight of their comrade's corpse. Rage flared in their eyes. "Who dared strike down Silver Snake?" snarled the lead golden immortal. His killing intent snapped toward Ye Cheng like a drawn bow. Ye Cheng raised an eyebrow, lifting his head to meet the newcomer's furious glare. At once, two of the fresh arrivals went pale. They lunged forward to clutch their leader's arms. "Stop! Don't be hasty! That's Ye Cheng!" "Ye Cheng? Who's Ye Cheng?" The leader hesitated, confusion flickering across his face. All he knew was Silver Snake had been his comrade on the northern front of the Wanchao battlefield. He had never heard of this Ye Cheng, a lone cultivator from the western reaches. Now, confronted with the uncanny ease with which Ye Cheng had felled one of their strongest, he trembled between fury and fear. Around them, the wind carried the scent of blood and blasted earth. Below, the Silver Snake golden immortal lay still, its life extinguished as effortlessly as a candle. And Ye Cheng, blade dripping, waited calmly for his next move. However, the two golden immortals before him were far from strangers. Like Ye Cheng, they'd once made their names in the western region, and they knew exactly who he was. Whispers of the peerless evildoer who had razed 5 major cities and humiliated the 5 great immortal dynasties still haunted every court and temple. "What? It's Ye Cheng!" One of them blurted, eyes widening in disbelief. At that, the senior golden immortal stiffened. Damn that Silver Snake, and damn himself for ever underestimating this cunning madman. An assassin who struck without identifying his prey deserved nothing less than punishment. "That Silver Snake, was he your ally?" he demanded, voice cracking. Ye Cheng turned his cold gaze on the immortal. Every heartbeat seemed to echo in the hush that followed. Then, with a soft, dangerous smile, he said, "I don't know this Silver Snake." The golden immortal's knees shook. He dropped to a shaking, reverent bow. "No, my lord, truly, we've never heard the name. It must have been a momentary confusion on our part." Ye Cheng let out a short, contemptuous laugh and turned on his heel. He had no more words for trembling fools. Ye Cheng lifted his hand, the blade of his sword gleaming as he plucked the fallen Silver Snake golden immortal's body from the ground and hovered it before the gathered masters. With an icy calm, he jabbed at the corpse and announced, "Empty your pockets of every treasure you've claimed from other immortal masters recently. Hand them over, and I'll let you live. Refuse, and you'll join him." A collective shiver ran through the assembly of golden immortals. Their leader, chest heaving, opened his mouth to protest, but the hollow, unseeing stare of the Silver Snake's corpse froze him solid. The pride and defiance he'd worn like armor drained away in an instant. Silence reigned. After a beat, barely longer than the snap of a finger, each cultivator lowered his head in submission. Trembling hands produced a single storage ring and placed it before Ye Cheng. Inside lay the spoils they had risked life and limb to gather over the past fortnight, mountains of spirit stones, priceless artifacts, and rare elixirs. Watching their hard-won fortune pass into another's control felt like watching their own blood spill into the dust. But Ye Cheng's reputation brooked no argument. Not a single voice dared rise in objection, nor did any of them attempt flight. They merely stood, hearts aching, as their wealth, and with it their last hope of turning the tide, slipped away. Only when Ye Cheng gave a slight nod did the remaining golden immortals realize they had been granted clemency. Heart-pounding, they didn't hesitate for a second. Each one spun on his heel and fled as fast as he could. The sudden turn of events left every cultivator in Kongyu Valley stunned. Word of Ye Cheng's execution of the Silver Snake Golden Immortal had already circulated like wildfire, but none of them expected him to back down so easily now. In truth, he had made no further move. His mere reputation was enough to send the entire Silver Snake contingent to its knees. Overwhelmed by fear, they had even laid down their precious treasures and kowtowed, begging for mercy. Watching them scramble away in abject terror, the other immortals exchanged uneasy glances. "What sort of immortal is Ye Cheng?" one whispered. "How can he be so ruthless, without lifting a finger?" Chapter 725. 3 days later, deep within Kongyu Valley, Ye Cheng sat cross-legged in a secluded cave that served only as a temporary refuge. His eyes were closed, brows relaxed, as he traced an intricate pattern in the air. With a subtle flick of his wrist, a glowing formation talisman appeared, hovering for a heartbeat before dissolving into strands of shimmering light. Instantly, the cave's mouth sealed itself, an invisible barrier now poised to repel any would-be intruder. Ye Cheng opened his eyes and let out a slow, steady exhale, the tension in his shoulders easing for the first time in days. He allowed himself a moment of relief. 3 days ago, he had arrived in Kongyu Valley, only to find himself the target of the Silver Snake Golden Immortal's assassination attempt. Their strike should have been swift and deadly, but Ye Cheng met it head-on. With a single, precise blow, he ended the Silver Snake's threat before it could even register. Then, calling on nothing but his burgeoning reputation, he routed the Golden Immortal's entire team. News of his triumph swept through the valley like wildfire. Among the more than 10,000 cultivators gathered here, no one had expected such a display of power. Immortal masters whispered his name in awe, elevating him overnight to the very top tier of Kongyu Valley's elite. From that moment on, fools like the Silver Snake Golden Immortal, those who misjudged Ye Cheng's strength, ceased to exist in the valley's circles. Now, sealed safely within his warded sanctuary, Ye Cheng allowed himself to reflect on the whirlwind of events that had so quickly reshaped his standing. His heart steadied, his focus sharpened. Whatever challenges lay ahead in Kongyu Valley, he knew this was only the beginning. In the days that followed, dozens, even hundreds of cultivators came calling on Ye Cheng, each eager to band together for the upcoming Sacred Mountain Treasure Realm expedition. He courteously declined every invitation, but the torrent of requests never let up. Finally, wearied by the constant interruptions, he relocated to a quieter cavern on the far side of the valley and posted a warning at its entrance. Unauthorized visitors would be turned away on sight. Ah, much better, Ye Cheng murmured to himself, clapping his hands once in satisfaction. He was just about to settle in for a long wait, letting the Sacred Mountain territory be fully surveyed and officially opened, when a fresh commotion rippled through the empty gorge. A new party had just arrived, and they were making quite an entrance. At its head walked a figure so striking that even the valley's rugged beauty seemed to shrink in comparison. Her skin was milky white, her waist as supple as a willow branch, and she wore a form-fitting green robe that accentuated every elegant curve. With each step, her long legs carried her forward in a rhythm so poised it felt as though the very air had bowed in deference. "Isn't that Fairy Qingque of the Linglong Xian dynasty?" someone whispered in awe. Gasps and murmurs spread as the cultivators recognized one of the dynasty's most celebrated prodigies, and now she was standing before Ye Cheng. As his shout echoed through the clearing and the visitor's identity became known, the other immortal masters in Kongyu Valley couldn't hide their amusement. Linglong Immortal Dynasty, renowned alongside the 5 great immortal dynasties that pursue Ye Cheng, and perhaps even stronger than any of them, had long upheld a curious neutrality. In theory, Linglong and the 5 great are allies, but when it comes to Ye Cheng, Linglong's stance remains deliberately opaque. They have never declared whether they will act against him. Whispers even claim that during the Battle of the Meteorite Wasteland, Ye Cheng colluded with Linglong Immortal Dynasty to scheme against the prodigies of the other 5 great. No one has proven those rumors, yet the 5 great have quietly resented Linglong's refusal to denounce them. Now, with Ye Cheng's arrival in Kongyu Valley, Qingque Jinx, Ian has led a cohort of Linglong's elite warriors through the valley gates, an unmistakable sign that whatever Linglong's motives, they intend to be present for whatever comes next. It was only natural that whispers began to spread. Could Linglong Xianxia really be in league with Ye Cheng? One Xiandao master wondered aloud. If that's true, another replied, this year's Shenshan Baodi contest is going to be far more interesting. Ye Cheng by himself is already a force to be reckoned with, a third chimed in, but he normally travels alone and seldom attracts much attention. Imagine him side by side with Linglong Xianxia, and perhaps a third immortal from Xianxia as well. They'd be the dark horse of the competition. All around Kongyu Valley, masters exchanged these thoughts silently, their eyes glittering with anticipation. A few enterprising souls quietly sold snippets of the rumor to the highest bidder, knowing that news this tantalizing would fetch a fortune. With the gates of Shenshan Baodi about to swing open, every major sect and power was on edge. The slightest movement by a top-tier cultivator could shift the balance of power. And no names were mentioned more often than Linglong Xianxiao and Ye Cheng. Yet high above the valley, Linglong Xianxiao's own entourage seemed utterly unconcerned by the chatter below, their expressions as serene as the morning mist. Alongside Fairy Qingque, the expedition included two other elite golden immortals, Poyan and Taiyue. Both were celebrated figures within the Linglong Immortal dynasty, but Taiyue stood out above them all. He had reached the perfect pinnacle of the golden immortal realm, and was a direct disciple of one of the dynasty's true immortal ancestors. No small distinction, even if that venerable master was slightly less powerful than Qingque's own teacher. When Taiyue stepped into the sacred mountain treasure realm, few could rival his might. Yet despite his formidable reputation, Taiyue's attention never wavered from Qingque. The intensity of his gaze was so strong that every immortal observer in Kongyu Valley felt its heat. But Qingque remained oblivious. Her eyes were fixed on the empty valley below, desperately searching for any trace of Ye Cheng. How could a golden fairy even hope to dispel the subtle array talisman he had laid? At last, driven by urgency, Qingque had no choice but to invoke her immortal power and project her voice across the distance. Fairy Qingque's voice drifted through the empty valley, clear, melodious, tinged with a charm all its own. "Brother Ye Cheng, Qingque has come to pay you a visit. Would you honor me by stepping out to meet me?" A ripple of surprise ran through the assembled immortal masters of Kongyu Valley. Many had quietly wondered whether Ye Cheng had secretly allied himself with the Linglong Immortal dynasty. But Qingque's gracious invitation suggested their relationship wasn't nearly as intimate as gossip claimed. Deep within his hidden cave, Ye Cheng opened his eyes and let out a soft, helpless sigh. He had sensed Qingque's approach the moment she entered the valley. A vague premonition had warned him her arrival wasn't a mere courtesy call, but at the time he'd shrugged off the warning, half hoping he was mistaken. Now, everything fell into place. The Linglong Immortal dynasty's leader truly did seek him out. He recalled their encounter in the meteorite wasteland. Of the 6 great immortal dynasties present that day, only Fairy Qingque had held back, silently observing rather than attacking. Back then, her silence had puzzled him. Now he understood it as a deliberate choice, and a sign that her motives ran far deeper than anyone suspected. Ye Cheng had once spared Fairy Qingque's life, and their paths crossed again, quite by chance. When the gates to the sacred mountain's treasure realm opened this time, she made a point of seeking him out. Though she said nothing, her intent was clear to him at a glance. Deep within his hidden cavern, Ye Cheng remained perfectly still as he let his voice drift out, soft yet carrying to every corner of Kongyu Valley. No one could tell where he spoke from. "I'm not interested in forming alliances. You may return to the Linglong Celestial Court." A stunned silence fell over the assembled immortal masters. All had assumed that Ye Cheng would seize the chance to join forces with the Linglong Court. It seemed the most sensible move. Fairy Qingque's personal invitation had demonstrated the court's earnestness beyond doubt. Yet, even such sincerity had failed to sway him. Despite the collective shock, Fairy Qingque showed no sign of anger. She simply pursed her lips, the faint glow of the sacred mountain's hidden treasures casting delicate light over her thoughtful expression. Though her offer was generous and her cause just, Ye Cheng's resolve stood firm. He would walk his own path alone. Although he had already refused her outright, hardly even granting her a moment to speak, Fairy Qingque refused to give up. To Ye Cheng, the clash in the meteorite wasteland had been nothing more than a routine spar, yet his display of prowess had cast a long, unshakable shadow over her heart. More than ever, she was convinced of his greatness. If she could only secure his allegiance, the Linglong Immortal dynasty would surely distinguish itself in the coming contest for the sacred mountain's riches, and reap a bountiful reward. Determined, Fairy Qing took a steadying breath and spoke once more. Brother Ye Cheng, why are you so quick to refuse? At least hear out the terms I offer on behalf of the Linglong Immortal Dynasty. If any part of our agreement gives you pause, we can bind it with a Chaos Oath. She let her voice ring clear and sincere. Should either of us break it, the Chaos Tao will punish us, and our paths to immortality will be severed. What stronger guarantee could you ask for? Her earnest plea swept through Kongyo Valley like a sudden wind. Murmurs rose among the gathered cultivators as they exchanged glances, every eye fixed on Ye Cheng, waiting to see how he would respond to such a binding vow. Chapter 726. The Chaos Oath must never be taken lightly. It stands apart from the heavenly oath of the celestial realms. Born of the primordial Chaos Tao, it demands that the oath-taker scorch a portion of his own luck as collateral to the Tao. And the more talented the cultivator, the steeper the price. For someone of Fairy Qingque's caliber, invoking the Chaos Oath would decimate her fortune. It's true that any sacrificed luck will be restored once the oath is lifted, provided both parties fulfill their pledges, but the risk remains enormous. Both Ye Cheng and Fairy Qingque are bound to venture next into the sacred mountain treasure land. If Ye Cheng were to fall at the hands of rival masters before the oath's conditions are met, the bond would break, and Qingque's forfeited destiny would be lost forever. With her rank and experience, she knows these stakes all too well. Yet she has chosen to speak these words anyway. Whatever else may be said, her sincerity is undeniable. The two golden immortals, Taiyue and Poyun, paled at Fairy Qingque's unexpected declaration. Since when had the Linglong Immortal Dynasty's masters ever humbled themselves so before an outsider? How could someone like Ye Cheng possibly warrant their full support? But Fairy Qingque had already spoken, and even Taiyue, who secretly admired her, could only swallow his objections. They'll have their chance to settle this, Taiyue muttered under his breath, once Ye Cheng emerges and officially joins our cause. Deep within the cave, Ye Cheng, whose reputation for solitary strength was already legendary, arched a brow in mild surprise. He had not expected Fairy Qingque to be so magnanimous. Yet an alliance, however prestigious, would only bind his hands and feet. He didn't need partners when his own power was more than sufficient. Rising to his full height, Ye Cheng addressed her calmly. Fairy Qingque, your offer is generous indeed, but I'm accustomed to fighting my own battles. I must decline. A stunned silence fell over Kongyu Valley. The assembled fairies exchanged startled glances. None could quite believe how proud, how self-reliant Ye Cheng was. He outright rejected our terms. What a character he is. A few of the golden immortals exchanged puzzled glances and murmured among themselves. Ye Cheng's reputation for obstinacy was well known. None dared call him out directly, so they settled for comments on his unique personality. Fairy Qingque, overhearing his refusal, paused in surprise. A flicker of disappointment darkened her elegant features, but she quickly composed herself. Amid the drifting clouds, she offered a courteous nod of her fan. Though Ye Cheng stood at a distance, she made no sign of discourtesy. Since Brother Dao is so determined, she said softly, Qingque will not press the matter. Her words had barely fallen when the Taiyue golden immortal standing behind her could contain his irritation no longer. Qingque, he sneered, why waste words on this fool? If he's bent on walking alone, let him. He'll come crawling back the moment he finds himself outmatched. He turned away with a snort of contempt. The others tittered in agreement, already picturing Ye Cheng regretting his pride when danger inevitably closed in. But as the wind stirred the clouds, Ye Cheng merely squared his shoulders, determination shining in his eyes. Taiyue Golden Immortal swept a dismissive hand toward the jagged peaks surrounding the empty valley and let out a mirthless laugh. Ye Cheng, you may believe yourself all-powerful now, but in the eyes of the 5 great immortal dynasties, you're already as good as dead. The moment you step into the Sacred Mountain's treasure grounds, your fate is sealed. There's no coming back. He paused to let the warning sink in, then added coldly, the only chance you ever had was by bending the knee to our Linglong Immortal Dynasty. And you've thrown that away with your own 2 hands. Ye Cheng's lip curled in amusement rather than anger. He gave a single, dismissive chuckle. Is that so? Tell me, Golden Immortal, does Linglong truly possess the power to hold back all 5 dynasties? You speak with reckless confidence, almost as if you haven't considered the enemies you'd make. Taiwei's triumphant smile faltered for the briefest instant, enough to show that Ye Cheng had hit a nerve. Recovering quickly, he forced a grin and said, "Let's drop the subject of Linglong Immortal Dynasty." He straightened his robes, masking the flash of anger in his eyes. Around them, the valley lay silent, as if waiting for the next move in this high-stakes game of immortal politics. Just be clear, the feud between you and the 5 great immortal dynasties can only be settled through Linglong Immortal Dynasty's mediation. If not, then even if you never set foot on the sacred mountain, the entire Wanqiao battlefield, and indeed all of Feixian Daozhou, will be thrown into chaos. With the 5 dynasties hunting you, Ye Cheng, where could you possibly find a safe haven? That's enough, Taiwei. Stand down and show some respect. Taiwei Jingxian opened his mouth to argue, but Qingque, standing beside him, stepped forward and cut him off, his expression contrite. Brother, I failed to keep my subordinates in check, and they may have offended you. Please forgive us. We'll take our leave. With that, Qingque turned on his heel and fled, Taiwei and the others scrambling to keep up. Though Qingque had come to propose an alliance with Ye Cheng on behalf of Linglong Immortal Dynasty, his underlings' brusque manner had only jeopardized the very partnership he sought, might even have made them enemies. Ye Cheng watched them hurry away, shook his head with a wry smile, and paid them no mind. He turned back to continue his retreat. After exiting Kongyu Valley, the masters of the Linglong Immortal Dynasty erupted in heated debate. They had all witnessed Ye Cheng's formidable power, but in the end, he was only one man. "If he doesn't willingly join our dynasty," snarled the Golden Immortal, "there's no way he'll make it alive through the 10,000 dynasties battlefield." A fellow elder chimed in. "Brother Taiwei warned us, anyone who enters the sacred mountain treasure land never comes back. But mark my words, he won't even reach its gates." The Golden Immortal laughed coldly. "Look around. Every major sect's top masters are already converging here. Why should the 5 great immortal dynasties be any different?" He paced before them, voice rising with indignation. "Had their scouts not stumbled upon Ye Cheng first, we might have ignored him. But now he's fought in Kongyu Valley and made his name known. I guarantee you, long before the sacred mountain opens its gates, champions from the 5 great dynasties will arrive, ready to cut him down as a warning to all." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. They recalled too well the ruthlessness of the 5 great dynasties, and none dared doubt that Ye Cheng's solitary stand had painted a target on his back. Taiwei Golden Immortal's parting words about the 5 great immortal dynasties snapped everyone back to reality. "Those dynasties aren't benevolent, and they certainly won't back down," he warned. "I doubt Empty Valley can remain a refuge for long. We mustn't allow this place to become a battlefield. If the 5 great immortal dynasties drag us into their war, we'll be crushed by its aftermath, and no one will hear our pleas." The assembled masters exchanged uneasy glances. At the center of their concern stood Ye Cheng, outwardly composed as ever, but the others felt panic closing in. After all, the 5 great immortal dynasties were notorious for their relentless pursuit of power. Some were already considering whether they should slip away from Empty Valley before tension between Ye Cheng and the dynasties gave rise to open conflict. Before they could reach a decision, the sky above the valley darkened unnaturally. A roiling black cloud surged down, blotting out the sun and stretching across every peak and hollow. From its depths emerged more than a dozen robed figures. Their leader strode forward, an ancient bronze mirror held aloft in one hand, its surface shimmering with ominous light. At that moment, every cultivator in Empty Valley felt a chill trace their spine. The long-feared emissaries of the 5 great immortal dynasties had arrived. The cultivators of Linglong Immortal Dynasty who had gathered outside Kongyu Valley all went pale. They knew him at a glance, Ye Cheng, a top-tier golden immortal from the Moyue Immortal Dynasty, on equal footing with Linglong's own fairy Qingque. Ranked among Moyue's 10 greatest golden immortals, his arrival alone would have been momentous, but it was the ancient bronze mirror in his hand that truly sent a shock through the crowd. The mirror's surface was blurred and mottled with verdigris, capable of showing only the faintest, shifting images. Still, nobody dared to underestimate it. This was the legendary Rusted Time Mirror, a hidden treasure of the Moyue dynasty, renowned throughout the Moyue realm for having claimed the lives of more than one true immortal. The Moyue dynasty's secret relic, the Rusted Time Mirror. They've actually brought it out? Gasped the Taiyue Golden Immortal, finally finding his voice as he stared in disbelief at the ancient artifact clutched by Ye Cheng. He turned his gaze back toward the empty valley, a satisfied gleam in his eyes. Now we get to witness Ye Cheng's look of desperation and regret. Chapter 727. Taiyue Jingxian sneered, satisfaction gleaming in his eyes. For years he had pursued Fairy Qingque, only to be met with her icy indifference at every turn. Yet the moment she encountered Ye Cheng, Qingque's frost seemed to melt. She even bound herself by a chaos oath, imploring Ye Cheng to come to her aid. How could Taiyue not feel stung by jealousy? His bitterness, however, was quickly drowned by anticipation. The Moyue Xian dynasty's battle formation was already on its way to the empty valley, and this time they carried a heritage-grade treasure, the Rust Time Mirror. Legends whispered that this ancient artifact had claimed the lives of several true immortal ancestors who once dared oppose the dynasty. Taiyue Jingxian's grin widened. Here was the perfect tool to eliminate Ye Cheng once and for all. Across the valley, the gathered immortals' faces drained of color when they caught sight of the fabled mirror. A handful of those who recognized its power didn't hesitate. They soared up the nearest divine rainbow and vanished in a flash. The Rust Time Mirror, an elder whispered in horror, once activated, drains the life force of every living being within 10,000 miles. Don't stick around if you value your life, a kindly immortal master called out, urging everyone to flee. Fairy Qingque, well acquainted with the legendary Rust Time Mirror, felt her heart tighten at the sight. She longed to warn Ye Cheng to run while he still could. Before she could speak, reinforcements from the Moyue Xian dynasty swept into the clearing. No sooner had they arrived than an elite detachment from the Linglong Xian dynasty appeared as well. Though they knew little of the situation, the Linglong masters immediately noticed Ye Cheng's absence from Qingque's side, and understood at once that he had spurned their recruitment. Panic flashed in Qingque's eyes as she opened her mouth to shout his name, but a cold voice cut her off. Qingque, the Linglong commander snapped. He was an ancient golden immortal, his strength and rank unmatched in his dynasty. If you dare speak now, how will we ever explain this to the other 5 families? Keep in mind, you're one of Linglong's own golden immortals. With that, the tension in the air snapped taut, and all eyes turned to the trembling fairy, caught between duty and the desperate need to save a friend. Taiyue Jingxian's lips curled into a sneer as he glared down at Qingque, then cast a disdainful glance toward Kong Yugu. His irritation only grew. As for Ye Cheng, whom you're so desperate to recruit, I think he's wildly overrated. Even if he's strong, he still lags well behind our Linglong Xian dynasty's cultivators. Qingque felt a sudden surge of injustice on Ye Cheng's behalf. She opened her mouth to retort, but the weight of Taiyue Jingxian's reputation held her tongue. He was revered above all others in Linglong, higher even than she was. One haughty look from him, and she dared not challenge his authority. Seeing Qingque struggle under her silence only fueled Taiyue Jingxian's contempt for Ye Cheng. He turned away from Qingque, fixing his cold gaze on the empty valley below. In his mind's eye, he already pictured the moment when the masters of Moyue Xian would crush Ye Cheng, strangling any hope of his defection. A cruel satisfaction flickered in his eyes as he awaited that day. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh! A roar of wind and splintering rock echoed through empty valley as the gathered immortal masters lost all composure. One by one, they abandoned their noble bearing, retreating in panic. Better to die fleeing than be caught in a battle they had no stake in. Within moments, the valley lay deserted of its greatest cultivators. High above, the forces of the Moyue Immortal dynasty hovered without alarm. Their commanders had foreseen every contingency. Powerful seals now rimmed the valley, cutting off every avenue of escape. Those below were trapped, but there was one exception. Ye Cheng remained. Shadow Jingxian raised his voice, his tone cold with scorn. Ye Cheng, come out and face us. Hiding in the shadows and striking from afar, how pathetic. You think yourself clever, but compared to true strength, you're nothing." He laughed, amusement dancing in his eyes as he stared at the jagged mountain peaks. "Is this as far as the great Ye Cheng dares to show himself?" At that moment, the taunt was answered, not with a shout from the hidden peaks, but by a calm, unhurried voice speaking from directly overhead. Every face in the Moye ranks stiffened as the words cut through the tense air. "What exactly are you talking about?" Ye Cheng hovered lightly on a pillar of divine energy, his voice drifting down like a calm breeze. "Looking up yet? I'm already perched above your head." "What?" Shetuo Jingxian's roar split the air as alarm flared in his eyes. The gathered masters of the Moyu immortal dynasty scrambled to their feet and craned their necks, stunned by this audacious display. But Shuo, whose cultivation and strength were famed across the realm, recovered in an instant. A wry smile curved his lips. "Indeed, you're no ordinary foe. Toppling 5 cities is no small feat, yet your journey ends here." With a single motion, he drew forth an ancient bronze mirror. "Rusty time mirror, activate!" he bellowed. The mirror's surface flared with an eerie green light, its radiance fanning out across a full 100 miles. A low hum resonated through the air as the emerald glow bathed both sky and earth. Almost at once, the clouds overhead began to writhe and twist, as though reality itself were being pushed into fast forward. Swirls of vapor compressed and jumped with unnatural speed, while the atmosphere quivered under the strain. Below, countless onlookers watched with bated breath. One cultivator's voice trembled above the rising wind. That is the Rust-Time Mirror's power. Under its beam, years whiz by in moments. Even immortal masters will feel their lifespans drain away in the blink of an eye. Now the legend of the Rust-Time Mirror will finally be proven. A murmur rippled through the assembled Golden Immortals as they beheld the Snake Tuo Golden Immortal soaring overhead, the ancient Rust-Time Mirror hovering in his grasp. Some of them drew in sharp breaths, eyes widening with awe and dread. Others exchanged doubtful glances. "That can't be right," one of them whispered. "According to every account we've ever heard, when the mirror is activated, its light stretches for thousands of miles and instantaneously siphons away 1,000,000 years of life from its target. Yet, this display is barely a flicker compared to the tales." "Fool," barked another. "The Rust-Time Mirror is priceless. How could someone like Ye Cheng possibly wield the genuine article? A replica alone would be more than enough to dispose of him." Behind Snake Tuo, a golden immortal of the Moyu immortal dynasty offered a cold, mirthless laugh, his tone dripping with scorn. The first speaker fell silent, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Around them, the expressions of the gathered masters shifted, and even the usually unshakable representatives of the Linglong immortal dynasty appeared unsettled. Only a replica of the Rust-Time Mirror! A ripple of disbelief ran through the onlookers as they trained their spiritual senses on the artifact. The more closely they examined it, the more astonished they became. It really is just a copy, but it's astonishingly well crafted. In the annals of the immortal dynasties, Moyue had always lagged slightly behind the rest in raw martial strength. Its precarious standing among the great houses was due almost entirely to the Rust-Time Mirror. Yet there was only one true mirror, and only the true immortal ancestor could unlock its full divine might. As formidable as it was for deterrence, it had never sufficed for grand territorial expansion or to tip the scales in larger power struggles. Now, against all odds, Moyue has produced a flawless replica of the Rust-Time Mirror. Admittedly, it cannot rival the boundless power of the original. But after Whitney, Sing Snake Tuo Jingxian's demonstration, everyone understood its value. Under the blessing of this forged mirror, even those below the rank of true immortal can unleash a devastating, near-invincible combat prowess. Furthermore, this forged Rust-Time Mirror was nothing like an ordinary forbidden weapon. Typical forbidden arms offer only limited uses, but this replica, once infused with enough immortal power, can be activated over and over again. Once we enter the sacred mountain treasure land, wielding this Rust-Time Mirror, the Moyue immortal dynasty will enjoy an overwhelming advantage over every other faction. In their race for the treasure land, the Moyue immortal dynasty has truly gone all out, murmured the elder golden immortal of the Linglong immortal dynasty, his eyes betraying both awe and unease as he glanced at Shetuo Golden Immortal. Ye Cheng, however, barely lifted an eyebrow. Frozen in place by the mirror's enchantment, he appeared as lifeless as a statue to everyone watching. Yet before a single relieved sigh could escape, Ye Cheng stirred. To him, the emerald glow binding his limbs simply didn't exist. In an instant, the world around him accelerated into a blur, as if time itself had been rewound, fast-forwarded, and unleashed all at once, allowing him to break free. Ye Cheng's face remained perfectly composed from start to finish. With a single deliberate step, he moved clear of the rust-time mirror's emerald glow, and the effect was instantaneous. Everyone's eyes went wide as their pupils constricted. "What's happening?" hissed Snake Tuo Jingxian, his color draining. Even though his rust-time mirror was only a replica, it still wielded the power of a fairy treasure capable of sealing, or even slaying, a true immortal. Under that shimmering green light, an opponent should be frozen in place, struggling to break free. Yet here was Ye Cheng, already beyond its reach. Has he got a forbidden defensive weapon, or some hidden technique? Tuo Jingxian's mind raced, but there was no hesitation in his movements. He barked an order as he fell back and summoned his subordinates to hold Ye Cheng at bay. "Stop him! Regroup behind me! We'll finish this monster together." At his command, the dozen golden immortals of the Moyue immortal dynasty leapt forward in unison, forming a living shield around their leader. But Ye Cheng barely acknowledged them. He simply lifted his sword hand in a graceful arc and unleashed a single, lightning-fast slash. The air itself seemed to crackle as steel met spirit, and the charge of golden immortals shattered like glass under the strike. Ye Cheng's sword flared with rainbow-hued light as it swept across the battlefield, cleaving through every obstacle in its path. In an instant, over a dozen golden immortals were reduced to ash, extinguished before they could even utter a cry. The Snake Tuo golden immortal tasted dust in his throat and shuddered, but their sacrifice had bought him a precious second. Snarling, he whipped out the tarnished rust-time mirror and trained its ominous face on Ye Cheng. With a flash of verdant energy, a green beam lanced forward. "Die!" he roared. Triumph contorted his features as he watched the emerald light strike Ye Cheng head-on. A malicious grin spread across his lips, until a second blade, humming with fierce resolve, plunged into his side. There was a wet, sickening sound, a spurt of blood, and then silence. The Snake Tuo's victory cry choked off as his thoughts abruptly stalled. All around them, immortal masters stood frozen in stunned awe. Through the drifting haze of green light, Ye Cheng emerged unscathed, his sword still aglow with prismatic brilliance. He did not hesitate or flinch. With measured steps, he closed the distance to the crippled Snake Tuo golden immortal and stood before him, ready to deliver the next decisive strike. Ye Cheng lifted his hand and drove his finger straight into the Snake Tuo Jingxian's third eye. In an instant, the cultivator's sea of consciousness was shattered, and the Moyue immortal dynasty's greatest powerhouse fell dead at Ye Cheng's feet. Chapter 28. "This rust-time mirror is fascinating," Ye Cheng remarked coolly, "but it's a shame it's only a replica." With that, he swept his hand across the battlefield, reclaiming the Yuanxi killing sword. The beleaguered Snake Tuo golden immortal crumpled into a cloud of ash, dissipating on the wind. Ye Cheng lifted the tarnished mirror, its surface dull around the edges. Though it still pulsed faintly with temporal energy, he knew at once it couldn't rival the genuine article. Had this been the true rust-time mirror, he could have unlocked its full-time manipulating potential, played its arcane restrictions like notes on a chin, and woven them into his Zhutian Dao palace. Such an infusion would have propelled his cultivation to a whole new stratum. Naturally, the replica lacked that level of power. A flicker of disappointment passed across his eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it came. The critical fact was, he now knew where the real artifact lay hidden. Hunting it down would be challenging, but not impossible. And with the Moyue immortal dynasty spearheading the scramble for mystical treasures, Ye Cheng felt a pang of envy for the competing teams, but also a surge of determination. The true rust-time mirror was still within reach, and when he claimed it, his Zhutian Dao palace would ascend beyond anyone's expectations. It seems the other immortal dynasties have also produced treasures rivaling this replica rust mirror, Ye Cheng murmured, stepping back from the cavern's mouth. I'll remain here in the empty valley. Who knows what new intelligence might surface? With that, he withdrew into the cave to continue his seclusion. Outside, the gathered immortals, still reeling from his single-handed defeat of the Moyu immortal contingent, stood in stunned silence. None had expected him to linger after such a display. Even the fleeing survivors of Moyue's sect and the masters of the Linglong immortal dynasty hesitated at the valley's edge. Among them, Taiyue Golden Immortal and the Elder Golden Immortal of Linglong, who had only just arrived, were especially dumbfounded. Neither spoke a word as they exchanged bewildered glances. Finally, a soft voice broke the heavy hush. Fairy Qingque sighed and called out, "What are you all waiting for? Let's return to Linglong's base and make our final preparations for the next battle over the Sacred Mountain's treasure lands." Her words snapped the others back to reality. Taiyue Golden Immortal, the Elder of Linglong, and the rest of the party shook off their shock, relief, and surprise flickering across their faces as they turned to follow her. They had braced themselves for Fairy Qingque's ridicule, certain she would call them blind for failing to recognize the true hero. Instead, she offered only a gentle reprimand, sparing their pride. Even the venerable Golden Fairy dared no longer invoke his seniority. He bowed his head and followed her instructions without another word. Qingque sensed their relief, but she gave no sign of satisfaction. She simply didn't care. It wasn't mercy that held her tongue. It was humility. Who was she to mock those who had been deceived? And though she privately respected Ye Cheng's strength, she knew better than to assume he could shoulder an entire fairy dynasty on his own. Yet beneath that cool exterior lay a surprising hope. She wanted him to join the Linglong fairy dynasty. Just a moment ago, his decisive sword strike had made her realize he was a man of conviction, far from the puppet she could easily sway. Qingque let herself smile at her own foolishness. How naive she had been to toy with him one moment and attempt to recruit him the next. In truth, there was only one thing she could do now: watch him closely and see whether his actions matched his prowess. In the end, the fate of Linglong might depend on it, and on her ability to keep her own ambitions in check. Taoist brother Ye Cheng really is a marvel. Who would have guessed that someone so extraordinary had quietly appeared in our Fanfiction dojo? Qingque let out a soft sigh. The contest for the Sacred Mountain treasure land had scarcely begun, yet she already sensed that Ye Cheng would emerge victorious. If anyone overheard her thoughts, they'd surely accuse her of naivete. After all, during the Battle of Kongyu Valley, Ye Cheng had slain every Moyo immortal with a single sword, only to find himself shut out by no fewer than 5 great immortal dynasties. Their combined strength was formidable. The Shetuo Jingxian faction was just one of Moyue's elite forces bound for the Sacred Mountain. 4 other dynasties would arrive alongside them. By the time they all stepped within that hallowed ground, every competitor's cultivation would be forcibly suppressed to the level of a heavenly immortal. Still, Qingque couldn't shake the conviction that even under those restrictions, Ye Cheng would laugh at fate and claim the prize. Relying on their overwhelming numbers, the 5 immortal dynasties still seemed to hold the world's best chance of victory. Fairy Qingque's heart tightened as she stood in Kongyo Valley. Beside her, Ye Cheng watched the horizon with growing disappointment. As the day of Chaos Mountain's emergence drew near, not a single ally from the other dynasties had arrived. All his hopes of united support lay in ruins. Yet this wasn't simple cowardice on their part. Ye Cheng's display of power had far exceeded every expectation. With the true immortal ancestor absent, no great house was willing to gamble their finest cultivators' lives. "We'll make our plan once we enter the Sacred Mountain's treasure realm," the elders of the 5 dynasties murmured among themselves. "Even if Ye Cheng's strength rivals that of an ancestor-level cultivator," one insisted, "the aura of the true immortal here will sap him. He'll be vulnerable." "Then it'll be easy enough to deal with him," another agreed. Unbeknownst to them, the Sacred Mountain lay deep within the forbidden lands of the Chaos God, its hidden terrors waiting to be unleashed. No matter how powerful the formation was, it could only muster strength equivalent to a perfect celestial immortal. Even a true immortal ancestor might falter under a relentless human sea assault, let alone a lone cultivator like Ye Cheng. He had long suspected as much, but he hadn't counted on the 5 great dynasties to strike with such ruthlessness. After obliterating Shetuo Jingxian's squad, they ensured there would be no survivors. A single escapee would be a blemish on their honor more damaging than any open defeat. And yet here he stood, proof that they'd been unable to finish the job. Such was the irresistible pull of the rising Chaos God Mountain. Very well, Ye Cheng murmured, a faint smile touching his lips. If they refuse to come, I'll simply stay hidden. With that, he drew deep into seclusion, entering a self-imposed retreat to bide his time until the sacred mountain's realm was fully consolidated. Patience, he knew, would be his greatest ally. On the Wanchao battlefield's eastern front lay the grand city of Tianshu, its soaring spires and gilded gates a testament to immortal craft. Before the central teleportation array, the gateway off the battlefield, a squad of immortal masters gathered, their auras shimmering beneath the moon. Inside the city's bustling streets, more cultivators hurried to and fro, each pursuing their own fate in this crucible of conflict. From the shadows beyond the walls, Ye Cheng watched silently. The true power of the Chaos God Mountain was yet to awaken, but when it did, he would be ready. Many of them radiated powerful auras. Though they hadn't yet become true immortals, countless millennia spent within the golden immortal realm had elevated their strength far above that of ordinary golden immortals. Even a true immortal ancestor would think twice before intervening here. On the Wanchao battlefield, those who had ascended to the pinnacle of the golden immortal realm were the single greatest fighting force, their prestige rivaling that of any sect leader, and in some eyes, even the true immortal ancestors themselves. Yet the moment these exalted figures set eyes on Ye Cheng's contingent of immortal masters, they could not conceal their awe. Each member of the squad wore a crimson robe, its back embroidered with a phoenix in full flight, an unmistakable emblem of the renowned Shenhuang Xianzong sect from Feishan Daozhou. Even in a war as titanic as this, few sights commanded such reverence. Disciples from an immortal sect had never entered this arena before. Such an occurrence was almost unheard of. At first, the assembled immortal masters exchanged curious glances, but the instant they caught sight of the Shenhuang Xianzong emblem on the newcomers' robes, all surprise vanished. Shenhuang Xianzong wasn't just any minor faction, it was guided by an immortal master of great renown. Even more, among its disciples were several prodigies descended from the once powerful, now fallen immortal dynasties. That legacy alone was enough to secure them priority access to the 10,000 dynasties' battlefields, tokens of entry that most sects could only dream of. Recognizing the newcomer's pedigree, the on-site immortal masters, despite their own high levels of cultivation at the golden immortal perfection stage, bowed respectfully and fell silent. The supreme golden immortals assigned to guard the town likewise hurried to flank the Shenhuang disciples, awaiting their orders. Yet the Shenhuang disciples barely acknowledged them. They formed a neat line, eyes fixed on the arena gates, calmly awaiting whatever signal might come next. Ye Cheng couldn't help but notice the distinctive rings fastened at their waists. He'd seen that exact shape before, on the Dragon Phoenix Immortal Dynasty talisman he'd used to enter the Wanchao battlefield. The difference, however, was unmistakable. Their talismans pulsed with far deeper Dao energy. It didn't take long for him to put the pieces together. These Shenhuang sect disciples, just like the Jade Dragon sect master, were true scions of the Dragon Phoenix Immortal Dynasty. In fact, their bloodlines were even more direct and prestigious than the Jade Dragon sect masters. By pledging themselves to the Shenhuang sect, they had secured fates infinitely brighter than his. Their talismans were proof of that advantage. Whereas Ye Cheng's token served only as a one-way gate into the Wanchao battlefield, theirs acted like sophisticated locators, capable of sensing every remaining dynasty talisman scattered across the vast realm. No sooner had Ye Cheng set foot on Wanchao's shifting plains than dozens of faint golden signals began converging on his position, heralding the arrival of those hidden descendants. A contingent of Dragon Phoenix descendants, now pledged to the Shenhuang Immortal sect, had taken note of Ye Cheng's presence. Over the past few days, they dispatched scouts across the Wanchao battlefield, but every lead had ended in disappointment. Swoosh! A strand of spiritual light swooped through the air, One of the descendants snatched it before it vanished, revealing a jade talisman. He closed his eyes and poured his consciousness into it, hoping for a trace of Ye Cheng's aura. When he emerged a moment later, his face was grave. "There's still no sign of him," he announced, shaking his head. "He isn't in the eastern region at all. He must be hiding somewhere else on the field." Around him, the other Dragon Phoenix disciples exchanged glances. The Grand Shenhuang sect competition was fast approaching, and they could not afford to linger any longer. Today was the last day they could remain on the Wanchao battlefield. "We've run out of time," another disciple admitted. "We must return to prepare for the contest." With heavy hearts, they gathered their talismans and set off, their search for Ye Cheng temporarily at an end. "It seems we still haven't found our compatriot," the leading golden immortal of the Dragon and Phoenix dynasty muttered. He pursed his lips, then flicked a handful of jade talismans into the air. They shot out above the city walls, scat, tearing toward distant points across the eastern region. "Relay orders to our agents. Continue probing the Wanchao battlefield. Alert us at once if anyone spots him," he commanded. "Yes, Lord," the other descendants chorused. Each activated their own jade talisman. With a brilliant flash, they stepped into the teleportation array and vanished, leaving the gathered masters staring in awe. "Huh, those big shots are finally gone," one elder sighed in relief. As the last bright trace of the array faded, the cultivators exchanged looks and breathed sighs of freedom. They could still hear echoes of the dynasty scion's conversation about that mysterious young man, Ye Cheng. Despite the frantic hunt, no one doubted he was the luckiest of them all. A faint murmur ran through the assembled crowd. Who would have thought he actually has fellow clansmen in the Divine Phoenix Immortal sect backing him? Another voice scoffed. If that were true, why would he suffer such injustice here? Be reduced to nothing more than a petty city lord? Few knew the truth behind that skirmish on the Eastern Front, and Ye Cheng himself was entirely in the dark. At this very moment, he sat in full lotus within Empty Valley, his cultivation exercises drawing to a close as he awaited the grand opening of the Sacred Mountain Treasure Realm. With a final gathered breath, he sealed away his divine energies, and from just beyond the valley's mouth came a tremendous roar, as if the heavens themselves had split. The sound rippled outward for 1,000,000 miles. One by one, the immortal masters who had been meditating in concealed grottos emerged, their eyes narrowing as they swept the horizon for the roar's origin. When the source finally revealed itself, avid longing lit every face. Far off on the boundless plain, an immense mountain of deepest ink black had begun to rise. Coiling smoke crowned its summit like a lion's mane. From its base to its clouds-blotted peak, it stretched thousands of miles, its silhouette akin to a slumbering primordial beast emerging from the earth's depths. The birth of this mountain heralded the opening of the Sacred Mountain Treasure Realm, and in that instant, the air crackled with anticipation, for countless cultivators knew that immeasurable opportunity was about to be unleashed upon the world. A shimmering veil of golden light suddenly draped itself over the vast landscape, suffusing every hill and valley with an electrifying surge of primordial power. With a resonant hum, the mountain's form solidified, and in an instant the massif and the 100,000-mile region encircling it was sealed off, declared an official restricted zone. From somewhere on high, an ethereal voice whispered, "The Sacred Mountain Treasure Realm has fully manifested. At long last, it has revealed itself to the mortal world." No sooner had the words fallen than countless beams of immortal light and iridescent rainbows erupted from all directions, coalescing into streaks that pierced the sky. They surged toward the newly proclaimed Sacred Mountain Treasure Realm, each one carrying a cultivator desperate to claim its hidden wonders. Among the foremost was Ye Cheng, the young prodigy whose determination burned brighter than any star, charging headlong into the sealed domain, eager to stake his claim as one of its very first challengers.